over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star.
Good afternoon and welcome back. Well, it's now being reported that President Trump will reopen Alcatraz, the Rock, as a federal prison. Not Dwayne Johnson, but the huge hunk of stone in the middle of the San Francisco Bay. Trump ordered multiple agencies to rebuild the penitentiary, which was closed in 1963 over high operating costs and has been a tourist spot for decades. If any of you all make your way to San Francisco, it's a wonderful tour. Been on it a number of times. Why is the president saying this? Well, let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they occur in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historical context in which most events take place. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historic context in which they occur, thus enabling you to better understand and analyze the events that are impacting the global village in which we live. On today's episode, the issue before us is, will this idiocy ever end? God, it's one ridiculous declaration after another, not to mention the real catastrophes such as starvation in occupied Palestine. My guest is an independent journalist whose work can be found at Substack and thepolemicist.net. He wrote a piece a while back entitled Presidential Catastrophe. And oh, how prophetic is he? Dr. Jim Kavanagh. Jim, as always, man, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we will get to this tariff theater, Trump's weaknesses, and a reckoning in Gaza. But I want to first touch on this, and folks, please forgive the long read, but I've got to set this up, I believe, properly. Meet the Press host, Christian Welker, asked President Trump whether he must uphold the Constitution regarding deportations. And the president replied, quote, I don't know. I have to respond by saying again, I have brilliant lawyers that work for me, and they're going to obviously follow what the Supreme Court said. What you said is not what I heard the Supreme Court said. They have a different interpretation, end quote. Now, twice, the president has raised his right hand and said, quote, I do solemnly swear I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve and protect and defend what? The Constitution of the United States. He said this twice. He did this twice. Now, the Fifth Amendment says no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The 14th Amendment says, Section 1, all persons born born or naturalized in the United States, birthright citizenship, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Jim, I don't think this is so much an ignorant man claiming to be stupid. I think this is an ignorant man who thinks he's being cagey or cleverly avoiding answering the obvious, because to do so exposes the fallacies in his positions. Dr. Jim Kavanagh.
Yeah, well, politically, from my point of view, from anybody's point of view, I don't think it should make any difference to a certain extent. I don't know which is worse. He was asked, as you say, first it was specifically about the question of due process.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I don't know. And then it was more generally, do you have to uphold the Constitution? And it was, I don't know. I have my lawyers for that, is what he said. He's
Mm-hmm.
taking the attitude of a CEO of a business who depends on his legal counsel, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the game he's playing there. And, whether he means it or not, I'm not that interested in it. It's not something that a person who's a president of the United States should be saying. He should either know it if he doesn't know it,
Correct,
and acknowledge it and not try to deny it, try to find a way around it if he does know it, and that's what he's trying to do. So, it's although, again, he went all he put it on Pam Bondi. My attorney general tells me I'll follow it. Then I'll say it's constitutional.
Mm-hmm.
We'll follow the Supreme Court. So, look, Trump is someone who's, it's hard to predict. He's saying stupid and ridiculous things. He's doing stupid and dangerous and ridiculous things all across the board. And I don't think he cares much, frankly. It's not whether he just doesn't care. He thinks, I'm the boss. I got elected. I'm going to do what I want to do. I was elected to kick people out of the country, so I'm going to kick out due process. Is that part of this? No, it's just kicking people out of the country. That's what we got to do. So I just don't think he wants to think through any of the what superficial people would call the technicalities, which are legal principles that are very important for American people. Due process of law for all persons, not just citizens, but all persons in the country. And he's looking for ways that he can interpret things to mean to mean X when they actually mean Y or Z. And that's what he's doing with a lot of things. That's what they're doing with terrorism in order to interpret certain kinds of dissident activities that are pro-Palestinian as terrorist. And therefore, so he's trying to replace essentially the interpretive power of the courts and the court system with his administration's interpretive power. I don't know the extent to which it's going to last. It's going to be challenged. I think he's going to come up against a lot of resistance about this. And what he said about the due process stuff is we talked about this once, I think, on the show with John Kuriaki. I think I talked about it. This idea of deporting 10 million, 11 million immigrants, it's very hard to do because it takes a long time. That's right. If you go through due process, everybody's got to get a hearing. So that's what he doesn't want to do, but that's the law. That's what you got to do. He'd rather just figure out, I want this guy and that guy and the other guy. And because they're protesting Palestine, or because I'm saying they're all from Venezuela, everybody from Venezuela is an MS-13 member, and I get to make that determination myself. And the law does ultimately, and even the courts ultimately, give a lot of leeway to the president, to the administration about non-citizens and deportation. But still, there should be due process. There are procedures for deporting people that should be followed. So it's going to be, we're going to go through this. We're not going to stop.
Well, on the interpretive aspect of the Constitution, that issue was resolved in the case Marbury versus Madison back in the 1800s. So, so that I don't know how far he'll get on that question. And to his point about due process and deportation, people need to understand they're not trials. They're hearings.
Yep.
So it's a very truncated process. Most of them they only take a couple hours. You go before a judge. Yeah, you go before a judge. You explain the situation. The situation is explained to the defendant, and a decision is made. Boom! You're either get out of here or thanks for stopping by, and see you whenever we see it. So I just wanted to highlight the fact, because I've heard a lot of people try to depict this as he's just ignorant and doesn't know the Constitution. And I always think it's very, very dangerous to underestimate your enemy and, play this man as stupid at your own risk. And to that point, because I don't believe that the immigration issue is really the focus of the due process argument. I believe the due process argument is being made by the president and his entourage or minions because they actually want to exile American citizens in foreign countries. That is what I believe is the ultimate objective, the ultimate end or goal of the game that Donald Trump is trying to play fast and loose with the Constitution. And I think that the immigrant issue is just a trial balloon to see how far he can get with that argument.
Well, he suggested that himself. So I think that is a perfectly reasonable thing to fear. And yes, it's not just about immigration or immigrants or deporting illegal or undocumented immigrants or gang members. It's about also the general question of executive power. And to a certain extent, what you're saying about Marbury versus Madison is very interesting. And there are arguments about this from the left as well as the right about what the extent of judicial review is, and that's a legitimate argument to have, but that's a legitimate question to raise and have an argument about it and talk about it. Of course, he's not doing that because exactly, we all know that the kinds of executive power he's taking onto himself, he and his followers and his MAGA base would have and did, rail against when the Biden administration or a Democratic administration tried anything approaching that. So, these are not good faith questions. He wants the power for himself. He wants the power for it because he thinks he's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and anything he's going to do is going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread, and is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And his entourage of people, the Stephen Millers, the J.D. Vance, the whole entourage of Palantir, Thiel, and all, they want executive power to change the structure of the country, to eliminate all New Deal programs, to put the federal government, the whole Heritage Foundation, laissez-faire, we're libertarian capitalists, let's put the federal government into the bathtub and drown it, et cetera. And this is what he's trying to do. So I don't think he's aware of all of this. I do think he's kind of fundamentally ignorant and stupid, and he depends on little bits of pop culture. The Alcatraz thing is a perfect example. What is that about? This is about the movies he saw, and he likes the idea. So there's a lot with Donald Trump that is very unpredictable for that reason, and he tends to be influenced by people, guys particularly, who he thinks are strong and rich and who flatter him enough. So the last one who talked to him is going to have the most influence. And we've seen that throughout his career. And that's why I think he's very weak, politically weak person. He's pushed around into positions that he doesn't understand.
And we're going to get to that point in just a minute, because you and I were talking over the weekend, and I said he's the weakest bully on the playground.
Perfect. And, great expression. Yeah.
But I just want to quickly get back to this exile issue, folks, because first I used the word exile and not deport, because you deport people that are from other countries and send them back to whence they came or whence they've come. You would exile an American citizen, because if you were to deport an American citizen, you would send them to the United States. So that's why I use the word exile and not deportation. Here's what I see as a possible scenario. And Dr. Kavanagh, we can get into this as it relates to the tariff issues. the tariffs could cause such a downward spiral in the economy, and we're seeing that happen already, that prices go through the roof. We could wind up, as we talked about last week, hyperinflation, right? Now you have unrest, what could turn into uncontrollable unrest in the United States. People in the streets, all kinds of things going on, particularly in a country that is awash with weapons as the United States is. So now you have to bring in the National Guard. Now you may even have to bring in the Army to quell the disturbance. So now what do you do with all of these people that the president tries to declare martial law to quell the disturbance? Again, bringing in the Army and all of that. So now what do you do with all of these people? You exile them. You send them abroad. You remember he talked about the homegrowns.
Yeah.
We've got to do something with the homegrowns. And Jim, just to ring my own bell or toot my own horn, I said this weeks ago. I said this before the president said it. As soon as he announced sending the immigrants out and he mentioned due process, I said, oh, this has nothing to do with immigrants. This has everything to do. I just need to tell folks I was way ahead of this curve. Anyway, so that to me is and folks, also, this isn't just some crazy theory, because Jim, you know better than I do, these are the types of scenarios that they plan for. These are the types of things that they sit around and talk about. What if scenarios? What if this happens? We need a plan. Go study it. What if this happens? We need a plan. Go study it. So that way, when something like this happens, all they have to do is go to the bookshelf, pull out Plan 47, and bingo, they know what to do. Dr. Jim Kavanagh.
Yeah, one of my favorite theorists is the French theorist Etienne Balibar, who wrote about 20 years ago, building the state of preemptive counter-revolution. And that's essentially what they're doing. You know, there's no revolutionary movement because there's no real revolutionary political force that they've allowed, that has been able to build itself in the United States, certainly. There are all kinds of populist movements. They're not really revolutionary, but the conditions for revolutionary discontent are being built, are there, and are getting worse. So they build the structures and policies that are necessary, that would be necessary to put down a revolution if there were one. So it's the state of preemptive counter-revolution. You're right. And look, these criminalizing, certainly, look at this bill that they did pull out of and that's a good sign that that bill did not get through today, and they didn't put it up, the bill for 20 years in jail or a $10,000 fine for boycotting Israel.
Right.
You know, that's so, and there we can see the leading edge of this now is in the repression and the criminalization of anti-Israeli or anti-Zionist or pro-Palestinian expression and action, and that's an criminalization of it. I mean, throwing someone in prison is a form of internal exile, so to speak. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so that's the leading edge of this. And there's no question that this is just absurd. And it's using the interpretation of statutes. The character, I wrote about this before Trump was elected. He said the free speech fandango. He says he's for free speech, but he's the same sense he says he's for free speech. He says we're going to put more repression on people who promote terrorism, by which we're going to mean anything that supports the Palestinians. And that's what they mean, and that's what they're going to do. So and that's going to start extending to other things if they can. Look, if they get away with it, they'll get away with it. This is classic authoritarian state behavior, and it has to be resisted. And it's very difficult. Look, these kids now who are continuing to demonstrate at colleges are brave, and they're taking chances, and they're taking chances with their lives, and you see it. And certainly they've gone after anyone who's not a citizen, whether they're green card or on a visa or certainly all of those students were here on legally. And so, this is going to get worse, and they're going to fight it, and we have to fight back on it, and people have to fight. And there's no alternative. I mean, it's a fight that we're in.
Trump says he will reopen Alcatraz, what we knew as the Rock, as a federal prison. Right now, it is a tourist attraction. I want to say at its height, it held around 275, maybe 280 prisoners, because it's really a small space. Yeah. When you actually go into it, it's a small space. He's ordered multiple agencies to rebuild the penitentiary. Jim, to me, this is really about optics. I think he sees the opening or the reopening of Alcatraz as this great law and order visual deterrent. There's no way that anyone that, first of all, understands the history of Alcatraz, and then B, understands the logistics of all of this. You're going to spend what I think would be probably hundreds of millions to house a couple of hundred people in the middle of the San Francisco Bay. My older brother would felony stupid is what this is, Jim Kavanagh.
Well, it's comic book stuff. It's PR, but it is really a comic book version of American history and American penal history and a American movie version of what Alcatraz is. And he likes that. And he thinks it's a symbol, as you say, of the power of law and order in the United States and the good old days, and it's just silly. And that nobody who is interested even in locking people up, locking up a lot of people in an efficient way, is interested in reopening Alcatraz. It would be expensive and inefficient. It's just really stupid. And the people around him who have to pretend that they believe that there's something reasonable about this are just making fools of themselves, and will be called out to make fools of themselves. Reminds me, I did live in San Francisco Bay Area for a while. And so I know, but Alcatraz is not a real thing. It's a tourist attraction, as you say. But someday when we talk offline, I'll tell you about when I was driven into the real prison there, San Quentin, by a prison guard, driven right in. But so that's the real prison up there, is the San Q, and the big house. But Alcatraz is a joke at this point. So nobody can take this seriously. No, really, nobody who has any understanding or anything can take this seriously. And I don't know what it is, he only can take it seriously insofar he's really just saturated with, as I say, comic book versions of America and the history of America, in which Alcatraz has, a number of good frames in the comic.
Let me see.
He thinks of himself as Clint Eastwood. That's what he's doing. He's imagining himself as Clint Eastwood.
Al Capone was there. George Machine Gun Kelly was at Alcatraz. Alvin Karpis, who was the first Public Enemy #1. Arthur Doc Barker, the son of Ma Barker, was sent to Alcatraz. Those are some of the more, infamous individuals that were there. No one, 14 attempts in the 29 years. 26 people tried. Some think maybe 2 got away. They don't actually know the answer to that question. But again, it's just an utterly ridiculous idea, or a horrific waste of time, effort, energy, and money. Speaking of waste of time, effort, and money and ridiculous ideas, this tariff war, this trade war that this unwinnable trade war that Donald Trump has started. Jim, once you start down a path as perilous as this, it's very hard to turn the things around. You cannot. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to reclaim the relationships.
That's right.
And reclaim the markets that you destroy. Quick example: American soybean farmers export, I think it's about 70% of the soybean crop produced in the United States. They send that crop to China. Now, in fact, as a result of the I'm sorry. During the first Trump administration, we were exporting, I think, about 70%. As a result of those tariffs, China turned to Brazil and started importing a lot of their soybeans from Brazil. Now, China is increasing their importation of soybeans from Brazil. The American soybean farmer is getting crushed by this most recent wave of tariffs. Dr. Jim Kavanagh.
Yeah, this has been going on before the tariffs. All kinds of trading in essential commodities and agricultural commodities, even oil, has been going on outside of the purview of the United States. It used to be the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. They knew every transaction that was taken, with wheat and soybeans, et cetera. Okay. And they've been now, I wrote an article about this, they've been blindsided by the fact, well, we know that who's buying the wheat? From whom are they buying it? And that's all been now starting to go away because the BRICS countries have been trading among themselves outside the American system. And it's become a conundrum for the American farmer, for the American manufacturer, for the planners, because they plan their harvest. They plan their crops based on what they think, how many 100,000 tons or bushels of soybeans they're going to sell. And if the market is off by 1 million tons, 1 million bushels, then you're screwed. You grew all these soybeans. And as you say, when you add something like this to the general trend that was happening, which is a sudden war, a sudden attack, really, and a country like China says, okay, we're going to get our soybeans somewhere else. Russia can make soybeans. Brazil makes soybeans. Countries that don't have soybeans will say, oh, we're going to put some soybeans farms, because they're going to have also a policy. They're going to have a state-directed policy of let's make some soybean farms, and they'll make some. We don't have that in the United States. And so this is when you cut people off that way, they go to different partners. And so if Trump drops all the tariffs a month from now, the stuff, it's not coming back to the status quo ante. It's not coming back. And as you say, you've broken relationships and you've broken trust. You've demonstrated that you're going to act impulsively, you're going to act radically, and you don't really care. So they're going to try, and they will find ways to build more secure and more confident relationships with other trading partners. That's going to happen. Plus the fact that this is like the COVID lockdowns again for no reason. You know what I mean? You're destroying businesses. You have someone who has a kids' clothing store. I saw something about this the other day, and goes to the port to pick up his delivery that was supposed to be $200,000, and they tell him no, it's $350,000 now. He's like, I can't pay that. Businesses at that level are going to go out of business, just like during COVID. Businesses are going to go out of business, and it's not that easy to come. That don't come back like that. Oh, I went out of business. I'm 2 minutes. Now I'm going to come back in business. No, your life is destroyed. Your life is. So the truckers, when the port of Seattle has no traffic in it, when the port of Los Angeles, I just saw on Bloomberg, the director of the port of Los Angeles, saying we're going to go down 35-40% next week.
Next week.
Yeah, next week.
Next.
35-40%. So that's
wait a minute, Jim.
Yeah. I think it was next week.
Folks, because I saw the same thing. Folks, next week.
And that's just the first tranche. That's the point. They're still coming in. There's still some coming in. What he's saying is like in in a month, 6 weeks, it's going to be nothing there. And that means the dock workers who had overtime pay, who are now they don't even get a full day. The truck drivers who pick things up and deliver them, they're not going to get work. So this is going to reverberate down through the economy. It's going to cause I think it was Jamie Dimon or someone said a recession at best. We're talking about a depression. And it's plus the fact, let's get to the real heart of the matter here. I need my $30
and your 25 pencils,
250. So, but that's what he thinks. He thinks it's this cheap dolls from China that we're buying for our kids. That's what he said at the end. We don't use cheap goods from China. He doesn't. These are essential elements of the manufacturing process in the United States. The rare earth minerals, the magnets, the machine parts that are coming from China. This is not something. So if you want to have a tariff, tariffs have a position in economic development, and you can use them in certain ways. But you have to have a matching industrial policy, a matching development policy, and it's got to be. That's why China can deal with this, because China can say, guess what? You see, watch how China's farms work. China will because the state will say, and the state has infinite amount of capital because they have fiat money system. They'll say, we'll put capital into building soybean farms or, more doll manufacturers, whatever. They'll make an industrial policy, and they will maybe say it's imposed, but they will direct an industrial policy and a development of industrial capacity that we don't have that in the United States. Right here, it's every entrepreneur for him or herself. Oh, and that's what they think, Donald Trump. Oh, this is great because this will make American entrepreneurs go out and build manufacturing plants. Oh, yeah? I mean, really? I mean, you can't do that in a day. That takes 10 years. They took 40 years of deindustrializing in the United States. You're not going to reverse that either in 6 months or 6 years, but you're not going to reverse it either without a state-directed industrial policy and state-financed and capitalization that we've given up on. So it's really Donald Trump is doing more to destroy the American-dominated capitalist world economy than all of us leftists have done in 50 years, and it's going to happen very quickly because a lot of the work has already been done by the deindustrialization and he's put it on a downhill slide that's very steep.
Lee Ricks, thank you very much for that super sticker, and I want to get back to this policy point. Kevin Baptiste, thank you. How much more inventory does U.S. have on hand before crap really hits the fan? Well, I think that's part of what the director of the port was alluding to.
Yeah.
Kevin, I don't know the actual amount of time, but I do remember when I was in business school, the discussion about the shift away from having inventory on demand in warehouses to the whole short-term process, that businesses made a conscious decision. We're no longer going to pay for inventory, storing inventory in warehouses. We're going to operate on demand. And so that's why now, for example, if you go to a store and you see a shirt that you like and you buy the shirt and you go home and your wife or your girlfriend or your significant other says, oh, you ought to go get another one. And then you go back to get another one. There's not another one there. Or you're in the store and you like a pair of shoes and you ask them, well, do you have this in an 11.5? And their answer will be, everything we have is out already.
Yeah.
There was a time when you could ask for a pair of jeans or something that you didn't like the way that what you were trying on was fitting. And you'd ask them, well, can you go in the back and check? And they'll tell you, no, there's nothing in the back. So our our department stores and all of these other entities, they made, I want to say in the mid 70s, they made this conscious decision to shift the way they were buying and warehousing goods because of the cost of money. It was cheaper for them to either just tell you, no, we don't have it, because they don't want to pay the warehousing costs to keep this stuff in stock.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Look, I'm just trying to make sure I got my power in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me go back to quickly. This you mentioned industrial policy.
Yeah.
And what's important for people to understand is we don't have an industrial policy.
Exactly right.
We don't have, and that's what you have to have, as they keep talking about bringing all of these jobs back to the United States. Folks, you can't just call up folks and say, we're going to start assembling refrigerators again, Whirlpool, let's start, or General Electric, let's start assembling air conditioners again. Everybody come down and no, it takes time. It takes time. Jim Kavanagh.
Look, I'm sorry because I'm afraid I'm going to have problems with my power. I see my battery draining. But look, that's the just-in-time, the whole just-in-time framework of
just-in-time ordering.
Exactly. So, and they went to that, and because they presume they could depend on the supply chains and control the supply chains, really, and they could for a long time, because the United States wasn't an essential market for everybody, but that's all changed. And so you have, and your point about the lack of an industrial policy, this has to do with kind of laissez-faire capitalism. We don't allow ourselves to do that. That's a bad thing. The state directing development is a bad thing. What we do is put out an idea and wait for people to bid for contracts. So and they'll do the planning, and so this is all a part and parcel of American capitalism and the way in which it's undermining itself this way. And we see what's happening in China. And again, China has capitalist enterprises, has but and Russia over the past 15 years, because they have the legacy of state direction and of state planning. You need to have some planning. And the problem with manufacturing and with bringing back jobs is even worse than that, because there is an issue here of automation. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So the jobs aren't coming back because there are no jobs. Watch the factories in China. There's nobody in them. They have the lights off.
Robots.
So that's going to intensify. So you have to start planning a society that takes account of that people, you don't want people to be doing repetitive work that a robot can do. This is part of the problematic of capitalism versus socialism, mm-hmm. and the Marxist theory of capitalism. In other words, capitalism develops the productive means and develops the productivity of labor such that it can eliminate a lot of repetitive, silly labor that you don't want people spending 8 hours a day welding the same spot, doing the same repetitive task. If you get robots to do it, that's fine. But then how do you account for society? How do you make people, how do people have full social lives where they have ability to live and to buy housing or to get housing or to have healthcare, to have a decent life, vacation, So this is the kind of thing we start to have to think about as a society. And you really, in the laissez-faire capitalist society, you're not allowed to do that. You got to leave it to individual decisions to kind of figure out how to work things out. It doesn't work that way anymore. And it's throwing away the power of the productivity of labor that's been developed. We have to now, we're confronting this very, very clearly, in a society. We have to now figure out a way to build a society in which people can have decent lives with. There's a lot of work that doesn't have to be done and isn't going to be paid for because it doesn't have to be done. Look at how the Chinese farms work. I mean, that's the kind of farm labor is the classic thing. Oh, nobody wants to do that work. Who wants to do that work? And if you can run a farm with machines that do that work, good. But that's the same thing in a factory. And so how are we going to live? How are we going to organize a society? We've forbidden ourselves from even asking that question, because that's going to be left up to the individual entrepreneur and the individual capitalist. And the way that's going to be solved is because someone will figure out a way to make a lot of money for themselves. That's the way it'll be solved. It's not we as a society will organize things in a way that'll make sure, oh, all these things are built and people can live in houses and people can have cars or have public transportation and people can have time off work and have a decent life. No, we're not going to, as a society, we don't do things like that. What we do is leave it up to individuals. We wait for someone to come along and says, I figured out a way to make a lot of money on this. And that works for 5 years, 10 years, and then too bad if they go bankrupt. But we don't have social planning. It's the notion of society itself that we have to kind of reintroduce. And that's a very profound thing, and it's a very important thing. It's ultimately the socialist project and the socialist premise. And the United States as structured is entirely opposed to that and excludes it from the possibility. And as a result, we're going to get crushed by the countries that do have social planning.
Let's connect some dots, since that's the title of the show. To your point, you don't have industrial policy. You talked about creating a society where all of this is taken into account. The United States isn't doing that. So what do you do with these excess people?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's look at what we're doing. It's called the prison industrial complex. You put the people in prison. That takes us back to what we opened the conversation with, exiling American citizens. What are you going to do with all of these people? An idle mind is the devil's workshop.
Well, it's worse than that.
Go ahead, Jim.
I think it's worse than that. I mean, you really have to look at this. Is part of the problem. And, I hate the fact that he got involved with Trump and it's going to destroy him. But, the health of the American people and the health of people is one of the things that's going on here. They really don't care. The health is an industry. It's an industry of keeping you alive, sick enough and well enough not to die, but sick enough to need a lot of drugs. And it's horrible to see this happen. And there is a sense in which they're going to make life more difficult for people. And they're going to make lifespans shorter. American lifespan has diminished in the last few years. So, it's a very, very bad situation. And it requires thinking through a lot of things and doing it without preconception and in ways that we haven't thought we needed to before. But we do have to think about a lot of different things. And so that's one of the things. Yeah. But the preferable response to them is not to put people in prison and not to put people in exile people, but to have them accept the situation. So what's going to come up is going to be a UBI proposal, which will come up from the tech bros and the billionaires, and they'll give you a UBI, which is because that's when they'll realize, and they'll suddenly realize they don't have to worry about the money. They'll give everybody a couple of $1,000s a month, but not necessarily any healthcare, or not necessarily good healthcare, but they'll have a kind of new serfdom where, okay, stay out of our hair. We'll give you all the TV shows you want and a couple of $1,000s a month and just enough to get by, and we'll run the rest of the society. I don't think that's workable either, but I think that's going to be one of the answers they come up with as to how to take care of people. And they'll, but the international dynamic is going to become important too, because we are going to see examples that are going to be very powerful of other countries that do things differently and actually are poles of attraction. And It's going to be hard. That's one of the reasons they're against those other countries. They want to get rid of them. They don't want anything that's outside of their framework. So it's a very difficult situation we're moving into. And the problem, kind of essential problem for me, is that the American populace is very ill-educated politically and historically, and is not given the tools by which to think through these things in a way that's helpful.
Lee Ricks talks about UPS laying off 20,000 workers, and they just announced that last week, while buying a pharmaceutical company for $6 billion. They're understanding the need to deliver packages. If you don't have packages to deliver, what are you going to do? Ricky Hatcher, thank you so much for that $5 super sticker. And one more point before we get to Palestine. You talked about American health, and I was listening this morning to one of the PBS morning radio shows, and the Trump administration is withdrawing support, the HHS, from this SIDS program, sudden infant death syndrome. Yeah. There's an entity within HHS that used to send out a lot of SIDS awareness to the states and the localities about how to prevent sudden infant death syndrome, not putting pillows in your child's crib, being sure that your child, when you put them down on their back, not on their stomach. Don't put the bumpers around the edges. All of these safety tips about how to prevent your child from suffocating in a crib. Well, now the Trump administration has decided, in its infinite wisdom, to stop providing this information. And the irony in this is Robert Kennedy Jr., the head of HHS, the program was named after his aunt, and it was started by his aunt, Eunice Shriver. And now they're canceling the program. These are very small but very important, significant indicators, significant signals about what the country, what the government, what the Trump administration is doing. Folks, see, it's one thing to be elected president, but what seems to have been lost in the sauce with Donald Trump is governing. You have to govern. Once you're sworn in, it's analogous to, the dog that catches the car. Well, now now the dog caught the car. What does the dog do? And start paying attention to this. The budget battle. Because now the House and the Senate, both controlled by the Republicans, but with very slim margins in both, they're fighting now over the budget bill, the framework. Because remember, the budget bill that starts in the Senate, that starts in the House, once it clears the House, it makes its way to the Senate. And both the House and the Senate, before a bill can be passed and become law, being signed by the president, it has to be the same. The language in the House bill has to be exactly the same language that's in the Senate bill, or you can't pass it. So they're fighting now. The House members in the Senate, they're fighting now, or starting to fight now, because the congressmen, they're now looking at their constituents and they're saying, wait a minute, we can't cut Social Security. Wait a minute, we can't cut Medicaid. I got people in my district. I've got 40% of the people in my district that are on Medicaid or Medicare. I've got 40 people, 50% of my people in the district are are on Social Security. I can't cut their benefits. They won't reelect me. So now they're fighting amongst themselves. We know the president made all of these promises. We know the president said he was going to do all of these things, but now the rubber has to meet the road. The rubber's hit the road. And what are these folks going to do? Pay very, very close attention to this. Now is the time for those of you that are interested, those of you that are concerned, those of you that are on Medicaid, those of you that are on Social Security, those of you with infant children that need more information about SIDS. Now you need to be calling your members of Congress. You need to be blowing up their phones. That's figurative, not literal. You need to be blowing up their phones, letting them know their jobs, their futures are in peril if they follow the Trump administration down this rabbit hole. This is serious business stuff, folks. And it's moved away from the rhetorical of Donald Trump on the campaign trail and sitting in the Oval Office talking, oh, we're going to have a beautiful budget bill. Oh, it's going to be lovely. One big, beautiful bill. Right, Jim? We're having some power trouble with Jim, and we're trying to get him back into the cycle here. And I asked this question last week, but I think the question is still relevant today, and that is with these tariffs. Because remember, last week, what's his name? The guy that owns Amazon. I'm drawing a blank on his name at the moment. Said that he was going to publish on Amazon the price you pay, how much the impact, the percentage of price that the tariff is having on the goods that you're purchasing. And then he got a call from Trump saying, hey man, you can't do that. You can't publish how much the impact that these, or the percentage on price that these tariffs are having on what people are paying. You can't do that. And so Amazon said, oh, we weren't going to do that, blah, 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 blah. Well, if the tariffs are so lovely, if the tariffs are such a wonderful idea, if the tariffs are such a beautiful thing, why don't you want the American people to see your beauty in action? Why don't you want Amazon to publish the tariffs?
Yeah.
Jim Kavanagh.
Yeah, thank you. Listen,
Welcome back.
I want to tell the audience I'm sorry.
Jeff Bezos.
My laptop just went out, and I had to try and gin up I got it up on the phone now. But your point, look, this is going to be bad. This is going to devastate Trump and the Republicans, and they know it. I mean, all the Republicans aren't as stupid as this, and there's going to be they're going to be despised. But we got to remember, the horror for me is that there's no alternative here.
Correct. That was my next point. Go ahead.
The Democrats are terrible. They were despised for good reason. They deindustrialized the United States. There was an opportunity in 2009 with Barack Obama becoming president. It was unprecedented. He had a mandate much greater than Trump has now. Both houses of Congress, veto-proof Congress and Senate. He could have done anything, and what he did was he saved the bankers. And he let people get kicked out of their homes and let the private equity companies build and the hedge funds buy up all the housing. What he did was, and there was a slow slide that started there of the people, multinational working class in the United States, that multicultural, that voted for Barack Obama, started drifting away from him. And of course, the black working class was the last to go, but they started to go. Right. And the policies of the Biden administration, the Warren Trump is going to get screwed because he's going to go right down the Biden path with the war in Ukraine. He's going to get screwed because he's going to go down that path with Gaza. And people don't want it. For a lot of the American firsters who voted for Trump don't want American money being spent in Ukraine or in Gaza or in Yemen for more wars. And Trump promised he wouldn't do that. This is all baloney, right? And they're going to find this out, and it's going to hurt people. But who's coming to this? The Democrats have no response to this. They don't have a policy. They don't have an industrial policy. They could win every election if they came in. We're going to give you universal health care. We're going to give you a job guarantee. We're going to have housing guarantees. We're going to make sure blah, 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 blah. We're going to end the wars in Ukraine and stop being Israel's dog and stop, being the most hated country in the world because we're supporting Israeli slaughter of children, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they won't do that. They don't do that. They'll give you, we're going to go, they're going to go fight all the cultural issues. They'll give you, what will they do? Bring DEI back or let trans kids, women playing men's sports? Is that the issues they're going to go run on? What are they going to run on? What real programs do they have? They had a chance for this. They failed miserably, and they haven't succeeded, and they haven't taken account of the failure that Elizabeth Warren was asked, "Oh, are you sorry what you said that you said when you said Joe Biden was the sharpest tack in the blood? He was great." "Oh, well, I didn't really know." Well, let's not talk about that. Let's move forward. They had this guy, and Donald Trump's an ignorant fool at best, and he's surrounded himself with pernicious billionaires. Joe Biden was non-compos mentis. They hid it. They lied about it. They lied about it. They knew and they lied about it. And not only did they lie about it, they attacked anybody who said anything about it. And they gaslit them and called them crazy. The same thing with all the COVID stuff. That was all a bunch of lies, and anybody who objected to it was gaslit and attacked. Hundreds of thousands of people thrown out of work, thrown out of school for no reason whatsoever. And they're not going to say, "Oh, we recognize that we did was really bad. It was really bad the way we lied to you about the mental condition of our president. That was a really bad thing to do." They're not going to say that. They say, "Oh, we didn't really know," and wow. So nobody should trust the Democrats. And the problem here that I see is that Trump never. If they had, we talked about this how many times, Wilmer. If they had let Trump talk and say what he was going to do, he would have spouted all this nonsense. Instead, they turned him into a hero. They did spend from 2016 to 2024 attacking Donald Trump, changing the law in New York so that they could bring him to trial on libel charges. So they turned him into a hero, an anti-establishment figure that he is not. He's nothing the least anti-establishment person in the world. But they created that impression of him in order to avoid doing something themselves, and when they had the opportunity to do it. So this is the horror we're in now. We're going to be stuck for 3.5 more years of Trump. But although, really, he's going to be so bad that I wouldn't be surprised if Trump didn't last out his term, because he'll get sick or die, or somebody else will shoot him, because the capitalists don't like what he's doing. But
he's messing with the money.
Yeah, he's messing with the game in a very serious way. So, but we're going to be stuck with this, and we have to fight it. It's going to be terrible. And what's going to come? The Democrats are going to take over the Congress in 2 years, and then they'll be fighting back and forth, and nothing will get passed, and nothing. That's just what they want. And so the Democrats have to be something more than "we're not Trump." Okay, and they're not. That's Correct. All they have. That's the best they have. And we need policies that change people's lives for the better and change the society for the better. And there's nobody in the Democratic Party, the Democratic Party as a whole will never do that.
Right.
Because they're owned by the same billionaires. And we see what the Republican parties are. People were fooled by the Democrats, and they were fooled by the Republicans. They were fooled by Obama. They were fooled by Biden for some amazing that anybody. Not many people were fooled by Biden, but they made it sound like they were. And they're fooled by Trump. And Trump's going to abandon them and screw over their lives. And we don't have the ability to build a political, electorally speaking, within the American electoral process. You cannot build a third party. That's significant. The laws and the practices prevent you from doing that. That's not a matter of will. It's not a matter of whether it's a party is a good party or bad party, or it could get a support, that you could build a third party that would get support, but the control by the moneyed interests, the legal and political control of the whole electoral system is such that it's impossible to do. So I don't know what's going to happen. It's not going to be good.
Can you give me a couple more minutes?
Sure. Yeah. I'm sorry for the interruption.
Oh, not a problem at all. Because I want to first get to starvation in Gaza and the fact that the Israeli government, the Zionist government in Israel, is now very clearly admitting, that their military one of their military tactics is starving women and children. And it's not a matter of they can't get the food in and the medicine and all of the other aid in. It's there. It's in trucks sitting in the desert on the border. So we don't need a massive airdrop. All you need is the guy standing with the stop sign in his hand, with the gun in the other hand. He just needs to get a phone call at the border crossing saying, hello, hey, Sam, let him in. Oh, okay. Put your sign down. Y'all come in. It's all that has to happen. It's just that simple. Let the aid in. Let the food in. Jim Kavanagh.
Well, yeah, this is one of the most horrible. There's nothing more horrible I've seen in my lifetime. This is a horrible, horrible thing. This is like watching the Nazis in the concentration camps on live stream. And that's not an exaggeration. This is horrible. This is a deliberate starvation of children. The Israeli project here, their purpose in Gaza is not to defeat Hamas. Their purpose in Gaza is to drive out the Palestinians, to make life impossible for them to live, unlivable, kill or expel 80% of them, as they did in 1948. We are watching what happened in 1948 on a larger scale. And this is the way the Jewish state of Israel was created. And this is the way it's going to continue. And the United States and every Western government that's backing this, and they all are, it's a crime. There's no worse crime in history than this, than we're seeing here. This is horrible. And it's not going to stop until and unless there's a military intervention, because that border you're right, the trucks are all there, but they won't open that. And they won't open that because the Israeli army, backed by the American army, is saying, I'm not going to let you open it. And that's the issue. And somebody has to go in there with humanitarian aid, coming with a military force and saying, we're bringing in humanitarian aid. If you want to fight us, you got to fight us. And it's going to be a strong enough force that they're going to be reluctant about that. It's going to create a scenario in the world. And it's very difficult. And it's a horrible thing to watch. And I don't know how the world can live with this. So, this is like watching the Nazis in Germany and saying, oh, well, maybe if we just let them have 2 or 3 countries or the apartheid in South Africa and letting it go. And is the world going to live with this? Okay. And the fundamental problem here that everybody has to realize is that people, for all kinds of reasons in the Second World War, the national interest reasons, as well as, generally we don't want to see people slaughtered, genocide reasons. And in the case of the apartheid South Africa, that was one of the last remnants of white supremacy over the Black Africans. Okay. Mm-hmm. By the time apartheid was conquered in the 90s, but don't forget, Nelson Mandela was a terrorist until 2007, according to the United States. So you would have been promoting terrorism, support Nelson Mandela. But by the time the 90s rolled around, the Western world could not anymore explicitly support white supremacy over African blacks. Okay. And they would not allow, they united to get rid of something that was so blatantly bad for their image. But we don't have that. People have to realize how bad this is. The Jewish supremacy over Palestinian Arabs is okay. In a way, for the Western world, for liberal Westerners, in a way that white supremacy over South African blacks wasn't. And that's changing. And that's what they're trying to stop from changing, okay? Especially among Americans. It's got to stop among Americans. That has been the case among Americans. Mostly because people never even thought about it. They just accepted it as a matter of course, as a part of the natural world, essentially. Oh yeah, there's this Jewish state, it's a nice thing, and why not? We're no longer fascist. This is what they deserve for the Holocaust. That's baloney. And it's got to be said that's baloney. This is Jewish supremacy over Palestinian Arabs, and it means they get to kill as many of them as they want. And they get to starve them to death because they don't mean anything in relation to the Jewish settlers. That's what it means. And anybody who supports that and the nations that support that, I don't know how and the world that supports that, I don't know how we can live with ourselves in this. This is a horrible situation, but it will not stop. The Israelis are using armed military force backed by the United States until they're challenged on that level. The only people who are doing it are the Houthis, and they're good for them. They're the only ones who are militarily challenging Israel. And Iran has some power to do it, but they're afraid they're going to get nuked. So we're going to see what happens. But we are watching, and we have already watched something that is horrible. It's a crime, unbelievable, the crime of the century. And it's not stopping, and it won't stop. The Israelis are, and they say it, there's no question about it. They are out to kill or expel all the Palestinians. They don't care what the world thinks about it. And the rest of the world doesn't care that much either, so far. And we got to stop that. So I don't know, that the United States, the people of the United States have to start saying about Jewish supremacy over Palestinian Arabs, that's as bad as white supremacy over black South Africans, or white supremacy in the South in the United States. And any Democrat or liberal who doesn't think it's bad and thinks it's okay to shut up and put that aside for a while all the Palestinians get killed and talk about other things is a phony, is a criminal. It's not okay. It wasn't okay to say, black people in the United States should wait another 50 years. No. But those things changed because there was armed resistance and because attitudes. There was political resistance, including armed resistance, including among black people in the South and the North, and certainly in black people in Africa. And they changed because the white community, the liberal Euro-American community, had to change their attitudes about it and did. But hasn't happened enough so far in this case. And we are watching a racist, colonialist genocide, and the entire Western world is supporting it. Israel has a forest fire, and they send aid to prevent the trees from burning down. Children of Gaza are starving to death, and they won't let that aid in. This is horrible.
Final question for you. Donald Trump loves to talk about his mandate. And he's deporting all these people because he got a mandate to do so. And he's implementing the tariffs. He got a mandate to do so. People elected me to do this, and damn it, I'm doing it. Well, we now go to the town hall meetings, and so much so that Mike Johnson has told his Republican colleagues to stop holding town hall meetings because the optics are just horrible. It's becoming harder and harder to find a Trump sign in somebody's yard, a Trump sticker on somebody's car. I was in New York Saturday night at the Ron Carter concert, and a guy walked in with a MAGA hat on. And by the middle of the show, the hat was nowhere to be found. What's your sense of this change of mindset? Because we were hearing when we were actually seeing these town hall meetings, people saying, this is not what I voted for. This is not what I voted for. What they really meant was, you weren't supposed to do this to me. What's your sense of where are they now? And What do you think this, to your point about thinking that he won't survive his term? Your thoughts, Jim Kavanagh?
Well, I do think that I would not be surprised at all if he were taken out in some way or another by the ruling class or some faction thereof. I mean, he is threatening. He is, as I say, accelerating the demise of the American capitalist hegemony in the world. I mean, not necessarily the demise of capitalism, but the demise of American capitalist hegemony, certainly. There's no question about it. And he's going to end up being despised. Look, first of all, the mandate, okay? I'm the member of the largest party in the United States, the non-voting party, because the whole thing is a scam. So, I'm not, as I say, it's like sitting at a poker table where the fix is in and you don't quite know how, but you know it's in, but you still play because why? Because it's the right thing to do? No. I value my money too much to put it in the poker. I value my vote too much to waste it in the American electoral system. So he's a mandate. This is, in terms of the American electoral system, he has a quote unquote mandate. He certainly beat the crap out of the Democrats. And what you're watching is the decredibilization of the American the duopoly, the two-party system. They both stink, and everybody knows it. And they fall for, especially, this is American tough guys. Oh, he sounds like he's one of us, and all of this stuff. He's telling it like it is. Blah 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 blah, and it's just baloney. But again, the American people don't have the political know-how to kind of get out of that. And the American popular culture supports it very strongly. So that's what we're in. So I don't know. I think, look, he's going to go down. This is the real effects of this are going to be bad on people's lives. Okay. And it's true. People generally want to know what's going to happen to themselves, but they also, it isn't what they voted for in any way. A lot of people voted against the wars. They did. He presented himself as an anti-war candidate. It was nonsense. I didn't believe it. No, for him to go around saying this Joe Biden's war, it's a great political line. I hope he does it, and I hope he does say about Ukraine, this was Joe Biden's war. I'm getting out of it, but I don't think he is. And he wasn't Joe Biden. He's the one who started. He bragged.
Oh no, and that minerals deal, I believe, is his rationale for continuing engagement in the region, because now we have to protect the minerals, which we don't even know what's really there, and B, also a way for him, if in fact the decision is made to get out, he can say, look at what we got out of this, which is BS as well.
Yeah, it's a PR. They're getting nothing out of that. But you're right. It ties him into it. You say, and he had again, this is where he's weak. This is where he gets pushed around into positions he claims he doesn't want, like he did with Syria. I'm going to get the troops out of Syria. No, you didn't. I'm going to get us out of the Ukrainian war. But you just got yourself in it. As you say, you've tied yourself to Ukraine in some way. And all those people around you, those neocon deep state people, you say you're not part of, they're all going to say to you, well, no, now look what you've done. So you're tied into this now. You have an interest in this. And so I don't look for him to get out of it, but he's going to lose on it. And so we have all of these things so Trump, I'm saying a lot of his, Marjorie Taylor Greene yesterday, in a long tweet about a lot of nonsense, but this Ukraine stuff, he's going right down the line of Joe Biden. We didn't vote for that. And a lot of them a lot of MAGA people online about Israel. We didn't vote. We don't want this. We don't want war in the Middle East. We get out of these Middle Eastern wars. We got out of Ukraine. So these things, plus the economic damage that's going to hurt everybody across the board, down from the billionaires they'll survive fine, but from the people who have medium-sized businesses down to working people in farms and plants and truck drivers, and they're all going to be hurt by this. And we're going to see in a month empty shelves, which you've never seen. And so people are going to turn against him. And he's not going to like that, of course. That's the worst thing. He's going to get mad. But so I don't know what's going to come of it. I'm not sanguine about it. I'm not optimistic about it, because the Democrats will jump in and they have nothing to offer. Nothing.
Dr. Jim Kavanagh, Thank you so much for your time, as always. Greatly appreciate it. You can find him at thepolemicist.net is where you can find his work. And what's the other spot? Substack.
Substack is best. Substack is best.
Substack. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm sorry for the technical glitch.
Not a problem, man. You got it solved. Appreciate it. Folks, let me make this last point to y'all. There's an adage that I'm sure everybody has heard that is, the house always wins. Any of you all that have spent any time at a casino knows the adage, the house always wins. If you go to Atlantic City, you go to Reno, you go to Lake Tahoe, you go to Talking Stick in Arizona, the casino that's run by the Native Americans in Arizona, the house always wins. Donald Trump bankrupted a casino. The house always wins. He bankrupted a casino. He's an incompetent loser. He bankrupted a casino. But now they want to go after those that have defaulted on their student loans, and by the administration's language, these folks, they're incompetent. These folks are losers. These folks are gaming the system. These folks are playing on American taxpayers. Why should American taxpayers pay for the loans of these people who got into debt that they shouldn't have gotten into because they were trying to pay for their educations? Who bankrolled Donald Trump when he filed for bankruptcy? What happened to his creditors? He owed them, let's just say for the sake of conversation, $100 million. Did the creditors that Donald Trump owed for doing business with the Taj Mahal casino, did they get their $100 million? No. They got pennies on the dollar because of his incompetence, because of his greed. Who's the loser here? The person that got into $50,000 debt for trying to get a degree from Columbia University, or trying to get a degree from American University, or pick a school, trying to improve their quality of life, trying to improve the status for themselves and their families and their progeny? Or the guy that, understanding the adage, the house always wins, rolled the dice and lost? I just use that example because the language that the administration is using to justify, to rationalize this totally inhumane act, this totally insensitive act, this totally just utterly irresponsible act, vilifying people who went into debt to improve their lot in life by getting an education, as now the Peter Thiels of the world are claiming, the Elon Musks of the world are claiming, we don't have enough qualified, competent Americans to fill these technologically advanced jobs that we need. So we have to bring in foreigners, engineers from India, engineers from China, because we don't have enough of them. But you want to vilify the folks that wanted to major in engineering, that wanted to major in software development, that wanted to major in programming, Now you want to send those folks to the poorhouse. But on the other side of the equation, you're complaining you don't have enough competent individuals. Folks, the hypocrisy is nauseating. And to Jim's point, I agree with him. I don't think dude's gonna make it. Because he's messing with the money. He's messing with the capitalists' money. And when you mess with the money, things get funny. So with all of that having been said, again, Dr. Jim Kavanagh, thank you, my brother. Really appreciate you joining the show. Thank you all so much for joining the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. New episode tomorrow. Melody, I forgot. I know we got KJNO on Wednesday. Melody, who do we have for tomorrow? Well, trust me, because I forgot. It's going to be a big one. Follow and subscribe. Oh, that's right. Will Hug. That's right. We're going to be talking about immigration. Will Hug is going to join us. Thank you, Melody. That's why you got to have brilliant, competent producers. International student advisor, Will Hug. He was with us about 2 months ago or so. And he will be joining us again tomorrow. And so please follow, subscribe, leave a review. Folks, there are no tariffs associated with your supporting the program. This program does not come to you from China. We're not importing this program to you from China. So there's no concern about whether or not tariffs are going to be associated with your contribution. So please contribute to the program. We desperately need that. And remember that this is where the analysis of politics, history, and culture converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter. And we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. Why? Because it's rhetoric-free podcasting. See y'all tomorrow. Will Hug, International Student Advisor, is going to join us. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a blessed remainder of your day. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.